everyone. Welcome to Generational Change, where we are transforming politics into service. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Justin Jackson, NFL San Diego Charger Justin Jackson. And so I am sitting here and I am doing my due diligence because it is really nice to be on the other side of the questions. And I like being able to go back to being a journalist and asking all of these kinds of questions and really having in-depth conversations um, that have nothing to do with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So, hi, are you there?
Yes.
Now
Sorry.
I see you and hear you. How are you?
Good, good. How you doing? I was on the Google Hangout thing. I don't know. There was
Oh,
like
did
two
you
links
click
in
the
there.
wrong link?
Yeah. So I was like trying to figure out because I tried to join the Zoom earlier and I don't know. I
No,
was
I
just
saw,
going
but I
back and
figured
forth.
it's because you were on your phone and I'm picturing you driving through like cool canyons in Malibu or something really fun like that and losing service.
I wish. I wish that was the case right now.
So that was, I arguably I did not watch, but I heard that you had a really good game yesterday. And so I did pull that up and cue that up because there was a really good run. And I'm also really excited that I know how to share screen. So that's also really exciting for me. So I'm just going to play this because this is
Okay.
really cool. And I don't normally ever get to do something like this, but that's what's going to happen now.
Okay,
And
cool.
there's no volume, arguably no volume. Look at you go, man.
Yeah, I was trying, man. I wanted to get to the end zone, but we're
So,
working on it. We're working on
no, that is awesome. I think that's just great. I'm just excited that I could even do such a thing. So,
it.
what is going on with you these days outside of football?
There's not too much time for too much outside of football. We have pretty long, arduous days. The season is, compact, 3 or 4 months, but in that time we're like football, like, almost exclusively. But I definitely try and keep up with obviously everything that's going on in the country, kind of socially and politically. So kind of as of late, kind of just been enjoying. When I say enjoying, I'm like watching the debates, like enjoying and just laughing at the theater of it all.
Can you believe
Um,
that's where we are?
it's wild, and it's crazy because I remember when I was younger watching those debates and thinking like, oh wow, like these are two really smart people. Like I'm listening to like what they're both, saying. And it's got to a point now where I can watch and they're saying the same things, but now I see like how it's all ruse, how it's all the theater. Like I said, the theater of it. It's, these two polished politicians, sitting there responding. But that's why Trump and the Biden debate threw so many people off, because it was just like two kids in a cafeteria at lunch yelling at each other.
Yeah,
And
well, and
it
they're
wasn't
both
the
pathological liars. So
right. And
so
exactly.
it's not like it matters even if what they were saying was perfectly coherent and made sense and was logical. It's not like we would be able to believe that.
Right. And it's so flowery, especially on the Democratic side, to the point where they're basically saying they're for all these good things, but all the people watching the debate are like, but you never did that for me. You have not done that for me. So why would I believe that you want that, if you haven't done it in the past? So I think, like you said, people see through this facade, because you can say everything you want on the debate stage, but if people's lives materially aren't changing from president to president, year to year, administration to administration, then they're kind of like, well, what's the point of it? And that's why you have so many non-voters.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think most people are pretty defeatist. And I think that that was the case even prior to COVID. I actually think that's the reason we ended up with Donald Trump is just
Mm-hmm.
people are desperate. And when people are desperate, they're going to grasp for whatever snake oil salesman is peddling, whatever they're, and when he did run originally, it was on a populist platform.
It
He,
was.
he
It
was
was.
saying about bringing back jobs and good trade deals and getting out of the wars. And so, I mean, that was I mean, he hasn't done any of those things,
Right.
but that
and that's
that was in
and that's the
theory what he was
con. Yeah.
supposed to be doing.
Right. Right. Well, he and this is why it's been interesting to watch this election season, how different it is than 2016, especially regarding Trump. like you said, he ran to the left of Hillary on a lot of things,
Yeah.
on trade, on foreign policy, um, and even on healthcare to a certain extent. And now, obviously, he hasn't done any of that because he doesn't truly believe it. And his entire strategy has shifted away from those populist messages to, from what I can offer you and what I can give you now, to just, he's been so kind of brainwashed in his own sense by just the media of it all. And, he is a narcissist. So he really cares about, all these things that these people are saying. And now he's on a debate stage just talking about the press and how they hate him and all that type of stuff. You have all these people watching that are like, okay, cool. What are you going to do to help my life? And he doesn't have anything to say for that. So I think that's why he's struggling a
Yeah,
lot more
he
this time.
doesn't stand for anything in particular. He just right now he's got whatever neocons, whispering in his ear, just doing whatever they tell him to do. I mean, the way that you know that he's still doing the bidding ultimately of the deep state, the people in charge, organizations like the CIA and the people that are, and the oligarchs and the people, the way you know he's still serving them is he's
Mhm.
still living to serve them. If he
Right.
wasn't serving them, he wouldn't be living to serve them. That's something that I've realized. And so ultimately he's playing ball with them, even though
Right.
it's not serving any of us.
Exactly. No, 100%. Yeah, 100% agree with you on that.
So let's talk. I mean, I know it's probably trite and cliche, but you and I, when we first spoke, was before George Floyd was murdered. And
Hmm.
obviously, it was post Ferguson, it was post, a myriad of other things, but
Right.
certainly not where we are right now in terms of this sort of uprising, which of course has been made worse by economic issues and COVID. But
Right.
where do
It's
you
the perfect storm,
feel
so to
it
speak.
is. It is a perfect storm, and I do think that the powers that be are wanting to create it as a race war when in fact it's really a class war.
Hmm.
Um, and when you start talking about things like, People's Party and socialist concepts, things that like Martin Luther King talked about, things like the
Right.
Black Panthers were about, that's
Right.
where you start to see even more sowing seeds of division. And I think that
Hmm.
that's a very common thing that happens when people at the top realize, wait a minute, if all the people at the bottom all get together, then we have a problem. So what can we do? How can we keep them more divided? So, but obviously policing is out of control. Like, so that's
Right.
that's been that's been for years. But what do you see in terms of, from your perspective, where we've come from when Colin Kaepernick first took a
Hmm.
knee, to where we are now in terms of awareness and what's going on in reaction?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the like you said, the problem is decades, centuries in the making when it comes to policing, particularly in Black and Brown communities. And then you take that, and then you take the Colin Kaepernick situation in 2016, and you take everything with George Floyd in 2020. In those 4 years, has it got significantly worse? No, it's been pretty consistently bad. It's just been, then that's why I've been encouraged to see is that we are moving forward in the minds of the American people, socially and just consciously of the racial disparities. It's being more accepted within these more conservative or liberal, old school liberal mindsets, which is good. That's a good thing. But and that's what sparked all these the good things coming from these protests. But and that's why it's so upsetting that in spite all of this, in spite all of these people on the street, you know, being activists, trying to push the Democratic Party, which is the party that they are most closely aligned with, to the left, and to remedy some of these racial and social and economic issues. Joe Biden hasn't. It's actually said that he wants to increase funding to the police, and so that's when you see that's how you create disaffected voters, right? Because they're marching, they're yelling and screaming, and the Democrats use that and say, "We hear you, we're here for you, vote for us." But then they also, behind closed doors say, well, or now even in public, that's what's so interesting with Joe Biden. He just says in public, no, we're actually going to give more money to the police. And so they feel, okay, then why would I vote for you? And I
Yeah,
think
I
that's
mean,
one of the
look,
big issues.
we don't have any good options. I publicly said the other day that I did in fact vote for Joe. It was not an easy decision for me. It is not something that I take lightly, and it's not something I would recommend to anybody. And it in no way, in my mind, eliminates his responsibility to be accountable for everything that he's done, both politically and personally. And it doesn't eliminate my believing of Tara Reade. It doesn't eliminate me recognizing him for the architect of the worst crime bill in this country. None of he is not off the hook for any of those things. Like, in fact, I almost, when I voted for him, I made this like conscious choice that, okay, this means I have to fight that much harder because
Right.
I don't want someone like Kamala Harris becoming president. So we've got 4 years to sort of get our act together. But ultimately, what it came down to for me is that while I do think Biden on policy, it's a corporate oligarchy. I mean, that's what it is. It's fascist, it's corporatism.
Right.
It doesn't matter either way, whatever. But I don't find him personally to be an authoritative fascist. Like when Donald Trump said he wouldn't like agree to the peaceful transition of power,
Mhm.
that really, that's not okay. Like
Right.
that's the kind of stuff that freaks me out. And at a minimum, I always said, Joe, at a minimum, will get us back into the Paris Climate Agreement. And so, from a climate perspective, there is no doubt that it is still better than what we have right now. It just is.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's for, us progressives and us leftists, is that because Donald Trump is currently the president, and because of, the malfeasance and all the corruption and everything that's obviously happened in his administration, which is not unique to his administration. That's pretty much how all Republican and Democrat mostly administrations are. So he's not unique in that sense. So in a situation like this, where you're going to have a lot of people like you and like a lot of other people that are going to vote for Joe simply because Donald Trump is that bad. Imagine if there was an actual candidate
Huh.
who was up on the ballot, who's going to actually do the things that are going to save the planet, that are going to give people health care, that are going to save money, get our troops out of these foreign wars, right? That's going to do a green, like, imagine if we had that candidate. So you
We
had the
did.
support. We
We
did,
did
right?
have that
We
candidate.
did have that candidate. And what happened to that candidate? Everything was done to make sure that candidate wasn't the nominee, because of that very reason, that a lot of people are just going to vote against Donald Trump. He's doing that bad. Pretty much anyone could win, type
Yeah.
thing.
I think that anybody who truly at this point thinks that Biden was the better pick strategically is just delusional. The person who was filling up stadiums is the person you need to beat the other
Right.
person that's filling up stadiums. So I
Right.
always thought that in my head. And the other point that is interesting is Bernie is still sort of talked about like the radical left, even though now most of us realize that he's barely left of center in most parts of the world, and it's
Right.
not really radical.
At
It's
all.
just not. It's actually pretty typical and standard. But Bernie was the compromise. Like I
Yes.
tell that to centrist people all the time. I say it all the time. Like you don't want this strife and this upswelling and all of this unsettledness, and you don't like being uncomfortable, and you don't like what's happening. But be prepared because there is a revolution. Like it's happening one way or another. Bernie was the
Right.
compromise. And they said, no, we don't want the peaceful revolution. We want to do this the hard way. And
Right.
so that's what I feel like we're in right now.
Yeah. And I don't know how many of your listeners or yourself will listen to Chapel Trap House, which is a great podcast, very lefty podcast. And they talked about in the primary how, like you're saying, Bernie is the compromise. Bernie is the least, like, I guess you would say, like, radical, right, candidate that's going to actually save the United States. That's going to save, the planet. That's going to like actually enact these policies that are going to like save people's lives. Like there's obviously a lot of people that are even way further left, like you said, of Bernie, but Bernie isn't even that far left yet. They painted him like that, and he kind of almost took that on too. where I think maybe a little part of his strategy could have been different was that he says he leans into that. I'm not that radical. And he would say that sometimes in his speeches. Is it radical to want free healthcare and as a guaranteed human right for all? So I think he maybe should have leaned a lot of that a little bit more. But I mean, like you said, the mainstream news was gonna. I mean, you saw Joe Biden win states he didn't even have campaign offices in, right? So like, that's how big
I have some
important the media is.
grievances with President Obama in regards to a lot of this and a lot of what's going on right now, and even him feeling the need to butt his nose into the
Right.
NBA thing. Like, why did that concern him? Other than probably his rich friend said, if
Yep.
there's anything you can do about this. Um, so no, I think that we're just in a time where the shift is happening, right? Like
Right.
it's just it's
100%.
inevitable. Progress is happening, but we definitely need to see police reform and to get back to that where not only does Joe not show remorse for the 93 crime bill, but he's now doubling down and saying, oh no, we don't want to defund, right? We're going to increase funding. But I get the sense that he's almost in a way backtracking in a way where he's saying, no, I mean for other services. We need to
Right.
increase their funding for other services. But then I would, of course, argue, well, then just why don't you fund those services? You don't need to
Right.
fund the police because they're not those services. Um, so yeah, I think that he's kind of paying lip service to that, but at least he's not telling the Proud Boys to stand by.
Right. And that's why and like going back to debates, and that's why I was really watching it like in disbelief, but also laughing at the theater of it because they're both so comically bad. But Trump is just so bad that like it's like of course Biden is up. Like believe the polls. Biden is killing him because he is doing that poorly of a job right now. And it's all kind of almost like Hillary, where all these things kind of came to a head at this one time and gave Trump kind of a bump. I think the same thing happened this time with Trump, where the COVID situation and him getting COVID and all these things that are just making him look so bad is giving Biden a huge bump, and he doesn't even really have to campaign.
Right. Like if Biden wins, it's not because he wins, it's more because Trump loses.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100. I mean, the guy hasn't not been campaigning, and it's good. I mean, if
Do
they're
you
looking
want
to
him
win,
to?
that's
Do we
right.
really want him
Exactly.
to?
If you want him to win, that's actually a good strategy by his team. It's that every time he opens his mouth, we saw throughout quarantine whenever Biden had all these viral clips of him, that you ain't black and all this other type of stuff. He offends so many people, and that's why he doesn't gain any votes. If anything, he's losing votes. So just
Yeah.
hide him. Just hide
Yeah,
him
it's
and
like the two of them,
let
it's
Trump
it's watching a
self-destruct.
race to the bottom. It's watching a race to the bottom every day. Like what more, how much lower? I mean, all Biden would really have to do is say tuition free college, let's pay off student debt, and he would just win in a landslide and it would just be a done deal. Like it's not that
What
complicated.
one thing, like, and that's what's
Anything.
so frustrating is that the left and Bernie Sanders and his movement and his followers, his voters, they are so, I mean, they're a good chunk excuse me, of the Democratic Party. And we, throughout all this, like you said, Bernie's filling stadiums, he has all this energy. And even with all of that, we couldn't get Biden to move to one of Bernie's policies, not one single one. Like that's how much disdain the establishment has for progressives. And it's just has been, it was, this year has been incredible to see that. It's that they're going after Republicans, they're constantly punching the left. Bernie's still campaigning for him, as he said, I beat the socialists. Like, openly,
It's insulting. Like he likes to pour salt in the wounds. Like he can't, like, yeah, he can't piss people off fast enough.
it's it's incredible. And as much of a beating as the left has taken, and the fact that probably like yourself, most lefties are still going to vote for him. Like, and that's why it's like that's why I think a lot of people are kind of wondering what the future is. You know, if
Yeah.
we're going to be given this we're going to be given this choice every 4 years. Like, how can we change this? You know?
Well, I'm very, like I said, I'm committed to doing whatever we need to do between now and 24 to figure something out. But there needs to be a primary challenge in whatever that is. So
Right.
Kamala Harris is not somebody that I am comfortable with in that position. And nor are most people, which is why she didn't even win a primary. So,
Right.
so
She didn't even get top three in her state. You
exactly.
know?
So obviously she's not who people really want, but we know how easy it is when someone's in that position to sort of slide in.
For sure. Especially when, I mean, she's an establishment and a, media darling.
Yeah.
She just got that
She was
tough piece in
always
L.
she was always
So
handpicked, I think, by Hillary Clinton from a long time ago to she's basically Team Clinton and
yeah,
represents all things Clinton and Clinton donors. And so, that obviously doesn't sit well with me. Um,
first, I think, like I said, I think a good chunk of like she really doesn't have a mandate for that spot,
no,
considering she didn't win. She was just selected by, the DNC and Joe Biden and the establishment for that
yeah,
spot. She didn't
yeah.
really earn that spot in any other type of way, especially electorally.
Yeah. And if Joe is serious about not running for a second term, then you're going to be looking at her in 4 years. And I'm going to be doing whatever I can do to work for Nina Turner to get her elected so that this is
Yes,
not our problem.
I'm down with that wave.
And,
I think Nina
I
Turner is
texted Nina
amazing.
and told her whatever party she's in is whatever. Like, I'm just team Nina.
No, 100%, because the courage that she had, particularly after Bernie clearly had lost and given up his campaign, and how she was just speaking the truth still. She wasn't going to, even though Bernie was starting to throw his support for Biden, she wasn't just going to lay down. She was going to keep going around and telling people the truth and speaking the truth, and obviously that didn't go over too well, especially because she couldn't even get on the task forces or whatever that they put together. They wouldn't let her on. So
I don't know
big
that she
props to
wants
her.
to
Big
be
props to
on.
her.
I don't know that she wants to be on, to be honest with you. I don't know that
And that's
she sees
good.
that as a real a
That's
real
productive.
entry, a real part in power making. Like, I don't think that she sees that as a position where she could actually make as much of a difference within
Right.
that paradigm. I don't know.
I mean, I hope you're right. And I think you probably are right, because I think she understands that, these task forces and committees and think tanks and all these things that, you know, garner a lot of funding and a lot of money and, a lot of, establishment insider jobs. These things are trying to research and find out solutions that we already know, right? We don't need a task force
No.
on what to do about the environment. The climate scientists have said, and people have come together and said, this is what we need to do. So either you adopt the plan or you don't, right? And I think, and she understands that all these task forces, all these things are just political theater. And the end of the day, Joe Biden doesn't want to end fracking. He doesn't want to give Medicare for all. He doesn't want a Green New Deal. He doesn't want any of these things.
No.
So these little task forces aren't going to do anything.
Right.
It's just a front. It's a facade. And that's why
Yeah.
I really love Nina, because she understands that. Like
I
most of us do.
actually I reached out to her for a little bit of guidance in making my decision as to what I was going to do. And, she's very proper and she didn't say come out right and say anything, but she highly suggested that I listen to Dr. West and what he was saying
Mm,
at the People's Party, at the Movement for a People's Party, which is
yeah,
essentially her saying we need to get rid of the fascists in the White House. So that needs to be the priority. So she didn't say it, but she kind of,
right.
I felt steered. Um, let's talk for a second a little bit about the NFL and what that's like working for that. I mean, they don't have the best reputation as an organization that necessarily cares about
Mhm.
Whether it's racial issues or labor issues or any kind of
Yeah,
issues that aren't rich people issues. Um,
right.
so how is that for you working for an organization that you know is like that?
I mean, I laugh and talk about it all the time. It's one of those, we live in a society type things, right? Because I, worked my whole life, sports, was always just a fun thing for me. Then it became a vehicle for me to get educated, to get a free education, obviously not being able to afford Northwestern $70,000 a year degree. I was able to use it as a vehicle, and now I'm using it, as a way to, provide means for myself, um, and give myself the freedom kind of to, once I retire, live my life the way I want to. So recognizing everything you said, that the NFL has historically been the most probably conservative of all the leagues, maybe other than baseball, definitely more conservative than basketball. And you saw it obviously with Colin Kaepernick and everything. And so I am glad that the NFL is getting better. Um, I think it's because the players are speaking out more and we feel like we have more power than we used to. And so we're forcing them to change. Society's changing, and obviously they're a corporation, so they have probably calculated that it's probably more beneficial to them to be a little more liberal on these issues, as opposed to being as conservative as they have been. So I mean, like I said, it's like a lot of things in society, right? Like as you try and go into the government to change it, but you're in a corrupt body, through and through corrupt, right? And it's like, how do you fight it? You're trying to fight from the inside, and I think that's what a lot of guys are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate that. I think that that's important. I always say that we need to be doing things on multiple fronts at the same time. There's no one
Have to.
right way to deal with it. But I've always sort of noticed this parallel between um, really NFL and labor in general. Obviously, you're not dealing with necessarily the same wages as people that are struggling to make a $15, they can't even get that minimum wage. But just in terms of you're there, shut up and dribble, shut up and run, do your job, stay in your lane. You're not allowed to be, have any sort of real opinion about anything. And I've always found that to be really problematic.
No, for sure, for sure. It's one of those things that, because we have such a strong and powerful voice, um, people recognize that and people will listen to us. And so if we're speaking against the establishment, if we're speaking for actual real change, that is a threat, to the people that hold capital and hold power. And so that's kind of where that was born out of. It's trying to make us just seem like um, these vessels for entertainment, as opposed to real human beings and American citizens who have thoughts and opinions on these issues, and care for them, because they affect a lot of the communities that we've come from.
Yeah, I see that. And I also think that, it's when you are able to assert your value as players at a level that's greater than, say, the NFL's interest in, say, their connection with the military industrial complex, which is
Mm.
obviously quite large. That, prior to, I forget what year, there wasn't a national anthem. And then even when there was a national anthem, the players weren't on the field. Right. Like
Right.
that's this whole sort of militaristic, nationalistic,
Yep.
promotional thing is courtesy of the NFL taking money from the military industrial complex.
Right. Exactly. And like I said, at the end of the day, the NFL is a corporation, right? And if they can make X amount more dollars, and they also feel like they're supporting the military, which is good, and all this type of thing. So for them, it's a win-win. But like you said, at a more base level, it has just completely militarized. Um, with the jets flying over, and we're always at every single game I can remember. There's like the little moment where they recognize a troop or a retired veteran or whatever. Um, and it's like, why don't we do this for teachers? Why don't we do this for firefighters? Why don't we do this for healthcare workers? Like, why is it just troops, right? There's so many other public servants that are providing, a public service that is helping our country.
But
Why
they're
is
not
it
paying
just
the
true?
NFL because they're not paying.
Exactly. And so that's where it's frustrating that, and for me, when I was growing up, I didn't know any of these things. So I'm like, oh, they're just supporting the troops. Like, this is a great thing the NFL is doing, right? Like,
Yeah.
and and what is it? It's just propaganda. That's what it is. And it puts it in your mind as a kid, and you grow up just accepting it as truth until you have to get deprogrammed from it. And like I said, the NFL, like a lot of these other corporations, are just, they're inextricably linked with the government, and so they're kind of looking out for each other. And so that's where you get things like, the nationalization type thing of or over, arching nationalism just right in your face, and militarism. But then we accept it as truth that it's a good thing that we're supporting the troops and all these things, and instead of supporting a military industrial complex that's actually taking money and resources away from
Yeah, I
those very
think,
same people.
yeah, we've definitely gotten a very blurry line in this country between nationalism and patriotism, and
Mm,
what those things mean.
true.
And I've never been a fan of the flag. I, as a kid, I used to get routinely sent to the principal's office for not wanting to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I didn't particularly care for the under God component. In retrospect, I really don't like the whole thing, because to me there's very little difference between doing this and doing this. Okay. And you're swearing allegiance to an entity, not a
Right.
principle. And
Mm, yes.
right. So even if your country is completely wrong, right? Like, look, slavery was legal. So does that mean that? So no, you're not allegiant to me. I wouldn't swear, I wouldn't pledge to a flag, but I would pledge to, look, and I even have it here, my little handy dandy Constitution.
There you
I'd be
go.
more than happy, So I think we don't understand the difference between nationalism and patriotism.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually so well put. Like, so well put. I never really thought about it from this angle. Um, Definitely. And you really, like you said, you shouldn't be pledging like allegiance to a flag, right? We should be pledging. I mean, our allegiance should be to the principles that are
Exactly.
guiding, that are the guiding light, right? That our founding fathers, like, you know presented to the country, and became and wrote into law, and all these things. Instead, we're just like, we just pledge our allegiance to a flag that has
Yes.
stars and stripes on it. What does that even mean? It doesn't mean anything, you know what I mean? And so there's all these problematic things, but they're so ingrained in our society that, like I said earlier, we kind of just accept them as I mean, you have to do it every single day when you're growing up, before school. So it's like,
I got in trouble a lot. I used to get in trouble quite a bit for not wanting to say the pledge. I even to this day, I'll be at a Dem Club meeting. I'll be at anything, even as a candidate, and I will stand politely, but I don't cross my hand over my heart, and I don't swear my allegiance. And it's just not something I feel comfortable doing. It's
yeah,
very, to me, very. Have you ever read James Clavell's A Children's Story?
I've not.
Okay, it was meant for kids to read, so it's something like you could read in less than a half an hour. And
Mhm,
it's the author of the book Shogun, which is an adult book. But so James Clavell wrote this book called A Children's Story, and it
mhm.
basically talks about, from a children's perspective, what happens if there was to be like this communist takeover of their classroom, and what that would look like, and how the teacher would get them all to dress the same and talk the same, and just all these sort of like grooming tactics as to how
You're
you
right,
get people
right.
to fall in line. And I just have never, I don't like that. I don't like groupthink.
No, for sure. And it's funny because, like you said, and growing up, this was rampant throughout, the United States curriculum and education, is that the bashing of socialism, the bashing of communism, right? And it's, oh, these countries, they don't, they don't have any food at their grocery stores, and they only get to choose between two different things, and look at us, we have all these choices, and blah blah blah. And then, but what they don't, and you accept that as, wow, our system is better because we have all these choices and they don't. And so our system is therefore better, right? And we can live more freely. But then you actually realize that everything is controlled by a few corporations that have a 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 sub corporations that have so it's all controlled by the same things. And you think you're given a choice, but you're really not. And you don't really have as much freedom as you want because you have to work, your teeth to the bone, to just to survive. And then you're, $1,000 emergency away from being homeless. Like, these are the freedoms that Americans have compared to these other countries, right? So that's where it's all the facade. But we're taught at such a young age that all these things here are inherently better. Our system has worked out better. Look how we live compared to these people. And so, but they don't show you how the majority of Americans are just increasingly in the last 30, 40 years, just so close to utter, utter destruction in their lives off of something that they can't control.
Yeah, it's despair out there. And I'm, waiting for the other shoe to drop with any evictions. And I mean, what we're looking ahead at happening is going to be unprecedented. And it's already out of control, the homelessness and the lack of affordable housing, and particularly in communities that also have the largest amount of wealth inequality. So you'll have, South Florida is horrible. And I know
Mhm.
that California is really bad too. And you
Really
see the
bad.
disparity. It's just not okay with me, right? Like, it's just not okay. And I just have this thought that we need to all come together and decide what we think is the minimum basis of life, basic living that everybody is entitled to. And
Right,
then we can discuss the best way to create that. But
right,
but I'm so tired of everybody encouraging people to kick down. And it's,
right,
we need to be punching up.
right. Well, let me ask you, like, what do you think your next move? Do you think you're gonna run again? Because I think that, with the kind of the groundswell of more progressive candidates winning, it can make a difference, but we need a bigger coalition. So like what what are your thoughts on running again? And
Yeah, we're not entirely sure what we're doing, and I say we because Peter's my partner, and we've been doing this together, basically from start to finish the entire time.
Mhm.
And it is very much a team group thing. Like, it is not. I wouldn't do it without him, and obviously they couldn't do it without me. And like, it's a team effort. So I
Right.
don't know about that, but what we are doing is keeping the movement and our coalition building efforts completely going. So on a local level, we
Mhm.
still have our Gen Core volunteer group that is still doing community service. Right now, they're focusing on local down ballot races that we have canvassers and people phone banking for them,
Mhm.
for other races that we know are in the same direction that we're wanting to move in. So we're trying to still keep the movement
Yeah.
going for down ballots. And then after November, we'll be back to doing service. This podcast is really, the concept is spreading this concept of what we call generational change. And,
Yeah.
you really are that to me. Like, I think of your age people as that is what I think of when I think of generational changes. People like you who are coming up and realizing and sort of starting to peel off those layers of the onion and really start to get
Mhm.
into what's down there. So like, that's really exciting to me. So anything I can do to further create coalitions, build bridges, connect groups, that's a huge
Yeah.
thing for me. I spoke about that before you came on. I love the fact that certain people, such as you, are what I say are like bridges where you have a foot in very different worlds and are capable of connecting groups of
Mhm.
people, and connecting ideas with
Right.
groups of people that might not otherwise be receptive to certain ideas. And that is something that I am so appreciative of. And I that's what I really want to use this platform for, is to spread that over as many bridges as possible.
Right.
Because like, your audience of people is going to be much more varied, and there's going to be people that aren't really political people, but maybe they're getting
Right.
more interested in,
No, for
learning.
sure. No, you're 100% right. And I've been having so many more conversations with, like my teammates and stuff like that, people that would, typically be apolitical. Um, but now, they're coming to me and they're asking questions and all these things. So like you said, it is building these bridges. And And we know that our message is popular, right? It's just because we don't control the information airwaves. We can't reach 5, 10 million people at a time, or we can, but it's just, we're working up to that. But like cable news can, reaching millions and millions of
Right.
people.
But when you get all players together, like this is one of those things, if the NBA and the NFL players all got together and said, we're not playing until this
Yeah, no, for
happens,
sure.
and you really didn't, guess what? Shit would change. Shit would change so
Yeah,
fast your head would spin. And,
no, for
tell
sure,
Obama
for
to
sure.
stick it. That's the thing.
Right. Yeah, and it's like you said, disrupting capital is one of the quickest ways to, one, get your message heard, and to get some type of change or some type of concessions or something. Because like you saw with the NBA, not playing those playoff games, like that'll get, they're gonna try and do a lot. Like, you got the president to call them, you know, and tell them, that they should stop. Like, that's how big it got. That's how important it was.
That should be the
And
sign
that's
that they needed to double down.
right. Exactly. So, but and that's that's a whole nother conversation. Obama, especially when it comes to the Black community, I could talk for days about that.
Well, we could
But
talk a little bit about like what you see as what is the, I say, Black agenda. I don't know if you know who Bob TV Brown. Do you ever watch his show on YouTube?
mm-mm,
Okay, he's
mm-mm.
great. It's the Rob Report, ROBB. I
Rob
think
report.
it's
Okay.
Rob Report. He's Robert Brown. And I like him very much. And he often talks about, and he's nonpartisan and he supports the platform, whatever the platform is. And he's often talking about the Black agenda and
Mhm.
what that is. And I've tried to, I sent him a message. He's not very good at responding, trying to get like what that is, because, that's also a very gray thing. What does that look like?
Right. And that's, like you said, I think there's definitely different factions. You know, there's the older, and like my grandfather and some of these older Black, voters who are pretty much just Democratic, always going to vote
Yeah.
blue.
Yeah.
And then you have the younger generation, like, the Black Lives Matter activists, and just all these, the younger, just Black generation in general, who's like very disaffected from the Democratic Party, and probably the the this one of the groups that just is probably going to have a low voter turnout for Biden, out of all other kind of subsets of groups. So
Yeah.
there's definitely factions within um, the Black population in general when it comes to voting. And as far as an agenda, I mean, it's tough because there's so, like, Obama was such a huge influential, piece within the, Black community, the Black existence in general, just becoming the first Black president, which is a lot of like our older, you know,
Yeah.
grandparents and stuff didn't think would happen. And then you have him go into office, obviously be constantly attacked in a racist ways for sure by Fox News. And so you're gonna defend him. You're gonna defend him because he's the first Black president, and you voted for him, and it was historic, and they're attacking him. And he talks so well and he seems so reasonable. And then you have these 8 years where the Black experience doesn't really improve. If anything, it gets worse.
Yeah.
And so now we're stuck where for so long we were defending him. He's symbolically a huge moment in the Black existence, and now he didn't really do that much. But there's still a lot of people that will just defend him no matter what. But then it's hard to get those people to see why it's really the establishment and the status quo that is the issue. It's not just Democrat, Republican, Barack Obama, you know, Republic. Like, that's not where the divide is. Like you said,
Corporate,
it's class.
non-corporate. It's
Right,
corporate,
exactly.
non-corporate.
Exactly. And so that's where the difficulty is in trying to kind of get the Black population as a whole, as far as voters, to understand that and kind of detangle ourselves from the Democratic Party as an institution.
Which is kind of brings us back to this idea of them sowing discord at the level that they do. And this comes from the oligarchy in general, in terms of sort of keeping it like it's this class war. So them going after Obama for so many years for ridiculous racist crap. Like, can you imagine if Obama was a president that had like 5 children with 3 wives and
I
cheated on
know
like all of this, like it would, he is
it would
just
be
so right. Like
insane.
it's just crazy. Right. So that's, of course, no, that's our white president. But so like, but he took all this ridiculous racist shit for so many years that did force this sense of almost like defensive loyalty,
Right.
um like reactive loyalty, and not just on the part of Black people, because I felt like that too,
Yeah.
because if I were looking strictly at policy, I wouldn't have voted for him again. Like I wouldn't have voted for him the second time in 12,
Right.
because he did start increasing drone bombing, and he did do, like there were
Right. The Wall
problems.
Street bailout and all
Right.
these things
But
that happened in the
because
first term.
Right, but because they went after him for race issues, it sort of makes everybody irrational regarding defending him, and it
Right.
makes it hard to have
On
policy
policy.
discussions.
Right. Exactly. 100%. Yeah. And like you said, I mean, I was only 16 or whatever, 12, between 12 and 16. But you were in the thick of it, right? You
Yeah,
saw that. And so you're one of those people who probably voted for Obama twice.
I
Second
did.
time, a little less enthusiastic, but still, like you said, that loyalty of trying to just defend him from these, right-wing attacks that are completely unfounded and unbased,
But it
and
really
the whole
shows
birtherism
you,
and everything.
but it shows you they didn't really have that much of a real problem with him, that it was all just theatrics, because they didn't
Right.
have a problem with him on policy.
Exactly. They actually agreed on a
Yeah.
lot of things, and I think something that definitely describes it the best is that Obama thought he was going to stick it to the Republicans by offering their own health care
Right.
plan, which
Right.
they couldn't disagree with because it literally was thought of in a Republican think tank and instituted by Mitt Romney in Massachusetts. There's no way they can disagree. They have to be reasonable in this sense. And what his biggest failing was actually thinking that the Republicans gave 2 shits about hypocrisy or decorum or rules or anything. They don't care about any of that. They will do whatever they have to get done what their donors want done. And that's what the Democrats will never do that.
No.
And so, and this is like you said, this is the problem with when you have a popular president like Obama, who capitulated at every turn and then turned around and said, "Oh, well, it's because of the Republicans, blocking everything." When in fact, even when they had a supermajority, um, and a filibuster-proof Senate, they didn't get anything done that was progressive
No.
or universal or for the people, right? And so everything, was Wall Street first. They all got their bailout money, and then the healthcare got their booming stocks with the healthcare plan. Like, who got taken care of 100%? It was the corporations, it was the, healthcare executives, everyone who had contributed to Obama's campaign, and they got taken care of while 5 million people got kicked out of their houses during a similar, like, imagine if, and probably will happen, but imagine if 5 million people had already got kicked out of their house because of COVID, and
Yeah.
Trump didn't do anything because of it, which
Yeah.
is, probably what's going to happen. But you see how unpopular that should make you as a president.
Yeah.
But because of how great Obama was as a politician, it just slid right off of him. And
And
it's
he is
it's it's
smooth.
it's
Obama is one of
he's
the smoothest, like talking people. I mean, just smooth.
just unbelievable politician. And that's why I always get so frustrated. I think in my head, I'm like, imagine if you have this unbelievable politician, first Black president, goes in there, takes all these attacks, gets these universal programs done that will disproportionately help the Black community. Imagine if that was his legacy.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what's so frustrating, is because that could have been his legacy. But somewhere along the line, he fell right in with the, establishment. He got in on a progressive platform. He did not legislate like that. He actually admitted that he legislated like a moderate Republican,
Yeah.
which is why it is so frustrating to be anywhere near the Democratic Party, because it's just almost unsalvageable whenever you take a deeper dive and looking at to any situation or any part of it. You just see corruption at every turn. It's just very frustrating, you know?
Yeah. And I wish I could be more encouraging about that. And just from my most recent experience, it is filthy, and it's filthy at every level. And one of the things that generational change is about getting people into office that are not corporate and not career seekers. So,
Right.
and that's one of the things that we're trying to do with down ballots, is get people in office that are not part of this machine that is just
Right.
inherently working against progress. And it's at every level. It's at the city, it's at the county, it's every level. You
Mhm.
have those kinds of impediments. And that's
And and
what
just
this is about.
and just how much it's going to take you and people like you and people, who are running as non-corporate, candidates, how hard it really is. Like, you have
Yeah.
to work 100, 200, 300 times harder than someone who's just raking in corporate cash and putting out ads and not even going door to door knocking and advocating for anything. And that's why it's so, like,
It's true.
when it happens, it's so amazing, but it's like that's why it happens so little.
Yeah, it's like we're chipping away at a wall. Like we're just chipping away, and eventually, hopefully, it all comes crumbling
Right.
down.
But you have to keep
Before we
working.
wrap up, I just want to ask you, what's it like playing without fans? Because I got to tell you, the fan soundtrack bugs the crap out of me. I cannot. It's like a laugh track to a sitcom. I don't like it. So how is that when you're there and there's no fans?
Well, so I think one stadium we went to pumped in a little bit of fan noise, but it was so quiet. Like, it was so quiet that it was almost like, why are you even doing this? And then other ones New Orleans, where we just played, they had like some friends and family in the stands, but it was like a few hundred people. Um, and so it's like very quiet. And so on the long run I had, it was just like silent. So I looked back and I was like, is there like a flag? Because like it doesn't sound like anyone's celebrating. Like,
That's
but
so sad. Oh
it was
my God.
just
That's
weird. So, but it's interesting because it makes you like, you can hear everything, and so it's like it makes your team kind of get tighter, because because there's no fans, we're yelling for the defense is yelling for us, like we're getting hyped for each other, and so it almost brings us closer together. So that's kind of a, silver lining positive, but it's definitely weird just being like, big plays happen and it's just like you just hear like the sidelines, but there's like no fan. Like, usually it's deafening. Like, if the Saints score in the Superdome, it's deafening, right? And it's like you just don't hear that. So it's
yeah.
definitely weird.
Yeah. But you guys aren't living in like a bubble kind of thing, right? Like how are
No.
you guys doing this? How do they keep it so like safe?
And it actually was going well for a while until recently. But so we get tested every day. And we have contact tracers we have to wear when we're in the building, the facility. So we'll get tested every morning, and we have to wear those contact tracers, and we have to wear masks in the building. Masks are mandatory. Um, and yeah, so basically, what they try to do is, if a case comes up, someone gets positive, they're immediately quarantined, and then whoever they were in close contact with, they also get quarantined, and then those people that they were in close contact with will get tested, and they can't come back until they get 2 negative tests in a row. So okay, you were in close contact, but you didn't get it. You're good to come back. So it's like, it has been wild. It has been crazy. We've had to adjust a lot. It's definitely not convenient. um, but it is what it is, and we have been relatively good. It would obviously be better if we were in a bubble, um, but a little
It's just
bit more
not
difficult.
conducive to that, right? I mean, football's just
Yeah,
not,
it's
basketball
it's
is so much easier to do that.
so much easier. There's less
Yeah.
players. you can have there's indoor courts you can have wherever, there's high school, but there's not that many, you can't have that many fields, you know what I mean? And then you can't have that many people on the field, because then if you have three different teams playing on the same field, it's going to get tore up unless it's turf, you know what I mean? So there's a lot more difficult. There's
Yeah.
way more people, we would have to go 4 months in a bubble without seeing people's families. Like, I don't know if that would go over well. So I don't know. It has been pretty good though. Obviously we're still playing, and we haven't had any positive tests on our team, so that's been good.
No, that's awesome. So when you're done with the season, like what are the kinds of things? I know that you're an involved person and that you do things and that you're a motivated person. So what do you do when you're not playing, like when it's not season? Like what are the organizations that you're affiliated with, and what kind of work are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, so our community organizer that works with the Chargers, he sends me a bunch of different options for like things I can go do. Like, I went to the Midnight Mission, and it's actually on Skid Row. It's like a homeless shelter on Skid Row in LA. And I went and talked to them, and that was actually one of the best experiences, just informationally, that I got, because I actually got to talk to, one of the main fundraisers for this shelter. And I was just asking her about, what's going on, like, why are, all these, how many of these people are, homeless because, they're drug addicted or whatever like that, and how many people are just homeless because they can't afford to live in LA because of the cost. And she was like, you'd actually be surprised. A lot of people would be surprised by this, but only about 30% of the people we get here are, drug addicted or need drug rehabilitation. The other 70%, a lot of people just, live out of their cars because they can't, they go to work, they can't afford to live in LA. And she was even saying one of the buildings there that had been rent controlled for 30 years, past 30 years, it was expiring, and they were going to double the rent in that building. And so, of course, no one who lives there is going to be. So that's how you just gentrify it. You push people out more and more. And so that's why it's just so bad. So I try and do things like that. Go to the Midnight Mission, talk to them, get information. Go to protests, talk to activist groups. Like, that's just something that I like to do, and I have a lot more time in the off season. And then obviously, I like to travel and hang out and go visit
You
friends.
are
And
really young. I always have to like bring it back for me to that. Like we're talking, and you talk like maturely and very like well read, but then I look and I'm like, yeah, but I'm still old enough to be your mother, so you're still really young. And hopefully we'll get back to traveling. Everybody will get back to traveling
I
soon
know,
enough.
hopefully next off
Where's your
season.
favorite
But
place to go?
oh man, well, actually, I have been to the Bahamas like three separate times, kind of like a family trip that I go with my cousins and my aunt. And I do love Atlantis. It is great. But I've been to Europe. I've been to Paris, which I really loved. But I do want to go travel more around Europe, and I want to go to Asia too. So I don't know. There's definitely a lot of possibilities. I mean, well, maybe if we get COVID under control, maybe
Yeah,
countries just won't be letting us in, and we'll just have to stay here.
I don't blame them. I
Um,
wouldn't let us in
I,
either.
I wouldn't either. And what a turn of events that is.
And we're the leading country.
Oh man, it's well, we're number one. We like
Yeah,
to be
we're in.
number one, right? So we're number
So
one.
last question. What does the idea of generational change mean to you?
Wow. I mean, to me, it means that the next generation won't be dealing with the same issues that we are and that the generation before us was dealing with. We need to stop this cycle of just passing down this just even more corrupted, even more unsalvageable system to the next generation, because we're running out of those, particularly with climate change. So to me, that just means actually doing radical things that are gonna end up saving the next generations and allowing the next generations to even survive on this planet. And I think everything that you and I are fighting for is just that. And so I'm hoping that, like you said, we can keep building those bridges so that we can get enough people to come together and just be like, wow, we're actually sick of getting treated like dirt in
Yeah.
the most wealthy country in the world. We're going to make a change, and we're going to actually lead the world and climate and these other things that are actually going to save humanity, because we are, I don't think a lot of people realize we are on the brink, though, especially with climate catastrophes everywhere. We're on the brink
Yeah.
of disastrous things unless we unless we do something about it right now.
Yeah, I think that was great. And that's a great way to say it, is that it's the change is ending the cycle, like that we're in this vicious cycle. I think that's a really great sentiment. But thank you so much for coming on and
Of
chatting. And
course.
we'll
I'm
share
glad
with
we could finally
you.
get it figured out.
Yeah, we'll share with you like some clips, and if you put them out there, that always helps, because we're just going to try to grow this as much as we can.
Okay.
But I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So
Thank
everybody,
you.
Justin Jackson, my NFL friend, which is very exciting.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me
Thank you,
on, Jen.
Justin. Have a good
Of
one.
course. You too. Okay. Bye.
Bye. So that was really fun. And he's just such a nice boy. And every time I talk to these kids, it's like, I'm just so amazed. I'm always just amazed, especially someone like Justin, because, okay, and granted, I'm a little bit biased because he's a Northwestern alum. So I'm always going to think he's just a little bit tad smarter than the average bear. But anyway, so that was really fun. And everybody, don't forget, check us out on Patreon. You can subscribe for as little as $1 a month. There's a $5 and a $10 a month option. We'll be getting in swag very shortly, and there will be some cool things for you to get. We are picking out some options right now, but stay tuned for that. And don't forget to follow us on social media. Have a good one.